Chapter 605. Arrangements Part 1. Zinnia, allow me to introduce to you Professor Zoger Vaster and healer Kyla Ernez. He is the leading light in the field of body sculpting and the expert I told you about. Kyla is a genius healer and a dear friend of mine. They are both here to help me with your procedure, Lith said. It is my honor that such an important person bothered himself for a nobody like me, Professor Vaster. Zinnia stood up and gave a deep bow in the direction of Lith's voice. Her head almost touched the floor. It's nothing, my lady. There's no need to thank me, at least not before we've succeeded healing you. Despite his humble words, Vaster puffed out his chest in pride. It had been a long time since a beautiful woman had praised him with such sincerity. Nice to meet you, healer Ernez. Please, take good care of me. Zinnia gave a curtsy, this time following Vaster's voice. The pleasure is all mine, Kyla said. There was something wrong with both the house and its inhabitants, something that gave her the creeps. We need to perform a few diagnostic spells that require physical contact. Do you mind if we touch your head? Vaster asked. Not at all. The moment Vaster cast his best diagnostic spells, Lith could see him turn pale before his usually calm visage was twisted into a red mask of anger. He was clenching his teeth so hard that Lith wouldn't be surprised to hear them crack. Kyla, I need a second opinion, Vaster said while making her way. Lith, I would like to take Lady Sarda to the White Griffin Hospital immediately. We can't perform any procedure until her body doesn't recover and she doesn't put a bit of meat on those bones. His voice was calm, but Vaster had a murderous look in his eyes that could rival with Lith's. I agree with your assessment, Professor. Lady Sarda needs immediate assistance. Unlike Vaster, Kyla's poker face was perfect. So far so good. I healed everything but left behind everything a competent healer would need to diagnose the repeated domestic abuse over the years. Lith inwardly smiled. In the case of divorce, Vaster's testimony would mean a great deal. Now, I've not prepared any luggage, Zinnia said. There's no need for luggage. The White Griffin will provide you all that you might need. Vaster opened a warp steps leading them back to the city's warp gate and from there they could reach a hospital ward directly. Once Zinnia was settled in her bed, Lith called Camila with his civilian communication amulet and left the two sisters talking before meeting the professor again in his study. Camila's supervisor wasn't very happy about a social call during working hours, but Journey had a family as well, so she let it slide. Scum of the earth, Vaster snarled as Lith entered the room. These are the moments when I regret having left the Queen's Corps. Back then, I would have killed people like Mr. Sarda without a second thought, just adding their name in the collateral damage list. Professor, we're healers, not cold-blooded killers. We took an oath, Kyla rebuked him. It's easy to say when you are so young and naive. When you reach my age, after you'll see things so bad that make that poor woman look lucky in comparison, you'll change your mind. I'm tired of seeing good people die while the bad guys thrive. I agree with Professor Vaster, Lith said. Now, if we can please discuss the treatment, I would love to have your input about how to proceed. I won't sugarcoat this, Lith. It's hard. The optic nerve is part of the central nervous system. One slight mistake can turn her into a vegetable. Even if you succeed in restoring her sight, it's likely that she'll suffer from side effects for the rest of her life. Her other senses might be altered and her personality might change. If you want my help, you'd better have a good plan, Vaster said. Lith explained to them how he had already managed to temporarily give Zinnia sight using mana as a conduit. I plan on using Camila, Zinnia's sister, as a blueprint. There may be many differences between them, so my idea is to use mana as a probe. To test where to connect the nerves before actually doing it. This way I can simply slow down the process and use a trial and error approach to avoid affecting her brain in any permanent way. This is genius, Vaster blurted out. Kid, you make me feel useless. How long did it take you to manipulate mana to this extent? It must have taken months just to create a spell so complicated, let alone master it. Lith felt embarrassed. He had devised the spell on the spot, by simply altering his true magic version of Chisel. Back then, Zinnia's desperation had driven him into an outrage. He had done it simply to give her something to fight for. Only later, while he had performed body sculpting simulations, did Lith realize that it could actually be employed as a diagnostic tool to solve most of the unknown factors when harnessing Zinnia's brain. Don't be so harsh on yourself, Professor. I worked on that spell ever since you taught me Chisel, so it's not such a big deal. Also, I can assure you that with your experience in manipulating mana, you would master it in just a few days, if not hours. Lith's words were only a half-truth, as usual. Thanks, but rather than me reinventing the wheel, it would be better if you shared such a spell. The kingdom would reward you handsomely, Vaster said. Sure, Lith shrugged. As soon as I make a fake magic version of it, he thought. The three of them spent the following hours discussing the details of the procedure. Vaster gave Lith plenty of advice thanks to his rich medical experience. The more Lith explained to him how his probe spell worked, the more Vaster understood what its strong points and limitations were. Kyla took note of everything, using water magic to manipulate the ink and writing faster than a stenographer. She didn't have Vaster's experience, but her ingenuity allowed her to find a solution whenever they got stumped. Zinnia needs plenty of food and rest before undergoing any procedure, Kyla said. I recommend to wait for at least a week. Agreed, Lith and Vaster said in unison. Professor, here is the paper that qualifies me as Lady Sarda's personal healer. If her husband tries anything funny, please alert me immediately, Lith handed him the document so that Vaster could register it into the Academy's archives. I hope he does, dear Lith. This time of the year the magical beasts are particularly voracious. Not to mention how many diseases he could, accidentally, catch while visiting a dangerous place like our labs. The two men exchanged a murderous look that gave Kyla the creeps. Before leaving the White Griffin, Lith went back to the hospital ward, to say Zinnia goodbye and give her a present. Thank you so much, she said while handing Lith back his communication amulet. Too bad Cammy is so swamped with work, we could barely talk. You know, I didn't step outside for years. Even the air is different from how I remember it. I already feel much better. Supreme Magus, web novel, Chapter 606, Arrangements Part 2. Well, it is different. The Academy is surrounded by a luscious forest, so the air is bound to be much fresher and fragrant than a city's. I'm sure that Camila will gladly take you out for a walk, both before and after the procedure. Lith said. If she finds the time, I suppose she could. Zinnia sighed. She had rarely been in a park, let alone a forest. She would give anything just to sniff a few of its flowers. In the meantime, you can talk to her with this. Lith gave Zinnia a communication amulet with only 2 runes, his own and Camila's. He explained both how to imprint and use it before he left. Lith invited Kyla and Anathor for a double date so that they had the opportunity to meet outside their medical practice. Camila is a lucky woman, Kyla sighed. First the camellia, then the procedure, and now even a free communication amulet. I wish I had someone who spoiled me like that. You have 2 wonderful parents that do nothing but spoil you, Lith said. I meant as a significant other, my father doesn't count. No offense, Kyla, but what can a boyfriend do that your parents can't? When I was with Floria, finding a present for her was a nightmare. You have to set the bar a little lower, or any sane man will run away in desperation. His words make her half laugh and half worry. Not only were her parents scary, but also being the Urnas one of the most powerful families of the kingdom, there wasn't much that she couldn't acquire with just a snap of her fingers. Kyla walked Lith to the Academy's gate and from there he went back to Lucia. Lith spent the time before lunch with his parents, returning to the tower only after they consumed the meal together. He had used no mana in the morning and the time with Kyla and his parents had relaxed his mind, allowing Lith to be at the top of his game. Solus, we are going to take a second attempt at the Orichalcum Skinwalker. If I have enough energy left, I'd like to work on your personal cloaking ring. Lith said. Necroforge again? Solus asked while preparing everything they needed on the mana forge. Yes, if it fails again, I'll use the remaining 2 chainmail sets to experiment with Bloom Forge. If even lowering the output to 50% doesn't work, I'll have no other choice left. Lith went to the forge mastering lab, taking out the chainmail set, the ingredients, and the blue mana crystals. First, he performed the bonding spell, to give the Orichalcum armor a mana circulatory system capable of harnessing the power of the powerful magic he would imbue it with. Then, he refined the Thunderbird's feather, the Magma Flower's petals, and the Skinwalker's skin into as many pseudo-cores. This time Lith refined them one by one. Since he was forced to use a low energy output, he also had the opportunity to focus on the core's smallest details rather than on raw power. The 4 pseudo-cores were so puny that Lith sighed, considering the experiment worthless already. He merged them with the help of the slime goop and only then did the real forge mastering begin. Solus used the energy from the mana geyser to empower both the magic circle surrounding the Lith's obsidian forge and the necro hammer. The forge mastering energies made the armor and the merged cores orbit around each other. They kept getting closer until their auras clashed so strongly that they bounced back to their initial position. Lith kept the charged hammer still while he studied the unknown interaction between the Orichalcum and the Thunderbird's feather. Soon the merged cores started to pulse and grow. The Orichalcum's artificial mana flow was drawn by the feather's energy field. Somehow, the feather was able to amplify the incoming mana, using part of it to feed the merged cores before returning the rest to the Orichalcum, making its mana flow also grow stronger. The exchange of energies lasted a while until some kind of symbiotic equilibrium was established. At that point, the merged cores were almost as big as those Lith had prepared during the last experiment. Incredible. No wonder our first attempt was an utter fiasco. Not only did I have to keep the pseudo-cores merged and fix any imperfection that appeared, but also due to the amplification effect on both magical items I had to fight against an increasingly strong rejection between 5 different kinds of mana. No duh, Sherlock, I told you that 50% was an excellent starting point. Solus gloated. Alright, stop, hammer time, he said, making her laugh so hard that she almost lost her focus. The necro hammer struck the condensed mana circle, channeling Lith's mana and willpower through it so that when the 2 items collided, they started to merge. Lith rhythmically struck at the circle, releasing each time a blue blast of energy. He would switch between using the accumulated mana to continue the merging process and fixing the deformities that arose due to the clashing forces at work. I'm so glad that I put the lab in the basement, otherwise the light this new type of forge mastering produces would be seen for miles. Solus thought. After more than an hour of unrelenting focus that pushed Lith's blue core and mind to their limits, the first prototype of Orichalcum Skinwalker armor was complete. That was intense, Lith said while wheezing. I wouldn't have managed to succeed without your help in the hammer. I wonder if fake mages can use Orichalcum like I just did. Journey's armor wasn't much different from my old one, whereas the Awakened Assassin's was a masterpiece with a lot of powerful enchantments. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. Why didn't you try to add to the new armor full guard as well? Solus asked. She knew how power-hungry Lith was. Because without the cloaking field it would turn me into a neon lamp. That means adding not one, but 2 new pseudo-cores to the mix plus using an alloy of gold and orichalcum. Too many variables for someone that had yet to succeed once. Lith imprinted the new armor with his mana and gave it a test run. In its chainmail form it was ugly and uncomfortable to wear. The rough edges of the orichalcum rings scratched and prickled even his enhanced skin. The moment he stored one of his suits inside the armor's dimensional space, the metal turned into a silvery liquid resembling quicksilver, which spread all over Lith's body until the mimicking process was complete. Its shape shifted faster than the old armor. The fabric of the clothes feels identical to the original as well. Let's test its defensive properties. Lith took an enchanted dagger out of his pocket dimension and handed it to Solus. She struck at Lith's chest, who blocked the dagger with his open palm. Thanks to an invisible energy field enveloping Lith's body, not a single drop of blood was spilled. Solus drew the dagger back and struck again, but this time Lith stood still. When the clothes and the blade collided, neither Lith nor the armor sustained any damage.